Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. Today we have Bridget McFadden, one of our ITS communication specialists, and she's going to be going through how to draw some shapes, some basic designs in Adobe Illustrator. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know we are recording today's session. So later today, we'll send you a link to the video where you can go back and watch anything that you may have missed. Also, Bridget's going to have some helpful links to guides, tutorials, other things that you can always reference when you're going back and trying to use Illustrator. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to put them in the chat at any time. We'll be stopping periodically to take your questions. And other than that, I'm going to hand it over to Bridget. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here. It's been a while. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to go over how to draw some basic shapes in Adobe Illustrator. I'm just kind of going to open up the tool, show you what some of the tool panels do, and then we're going to draw a shape kind of specific to scientists, but if you're not a scientist, I think you can also learn something here today. The little figure in the slide you're seeing right now is something I drew in Illustrator, just using really the basic shapes of like rectangles, squares, and lines, and combining them together. So we're gonna play around a little bit today and help you get familiar with Adobe Illustrator. So to get started, I just wanted to give you a little introduction of what is Adobe Illustrator. It is an industry standard vector graphics tool. It creates files with the extensions AI, EPS, and PDF. And it creates vector-based art, which is resolution independent. So this is, I'll go through some of these a little bit. The file name EPS stands for Encapsulated PostScript. It was created by Adobe back in 1992. It's a graphics format specifically for vector images that Adobe uses. And these, because they are resolution independent, tend to be preferred by publications that you are likely, if you're on the clinical side or the research side, submitting some of your publications to, because of this thing that we're saying it's resolution independent. What do I mean when I say that? Resolution refers to the number of pixels in an image. So when we start talking about resolution, we're going to use terms like DPI, which stands for dots per inch, or PPI, which stands for pixels per inch. This is referring to if you're creating an image that's made of pixels. Pixels are little blocks of color. They're picture elements, they're little tiny squares that make up what you see on your screen. And dots per inch is going to refer to if you were actually printing an image on a piece of paper, the printer would put a certain amount of dots of ink per inch on the paper to reproduce the image. Pixels per inch is what you're seeing when you're looking at an image displayed on the screen. With bitmap images, also known as raster, so like the image you're seeing on the left of the woman, images that have the file extension JPEG, TIFF, PNG is also a raster image. These are made up of pixels on a grid. So like the photographs you take with a digital camera, these images can only be scaled to a certain size before the individual pixels become visible and the image starts to look bad. Like I'm sure you've seen and experienced the term pixelated when you blow an image up too large and all of a sudden you lose resolution and you lose quality with the image. Vector, on the other hand, like what you see represented in the image on the right-hand side, and commonly has that file extension EPS, are not composed of pixels. Instead, they're kind of instructions for drawing the image. So instead of being recorded as blocks on a grid, vector images consist of lines, points, and curves. They're kind of made up of a series of mathematical coordinates, which means you can blow them up to any size or shrink them down to any size, and they still remain sharp. So that's what it means to say that a vector image is resolution independent. Just a little disclaimer, neither one is better or worse. Like as you can see, the quality that you get with the raster image, like a JPEG or a TIFF, is different. It kind of is more truthful to what you might see in a painting or a work of art using pastels. The vector image is going to be more crisp and clean, more like a cartoon. So even though this could be big or small, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. It's just advantageous if you want to reproduce art at a small or a large scale and kind of not worry about the resolution piece. So just one more example of what it looks like when you're painting with pixels. If you were to zoom in really close on this corner here of the shape, you can kind of see how these pixels are the individual blocks of color. And if you get too close, you kind of lose the quality. Drawing with vectors, on the other hand, we've got points on the grid connected by lines. So if you zoom in really close, it still retains that really sharp, clean shape. I also want to give you a little bit of an overview of how you get Adobe Illustrator if you work at Weill Cornell. So Adobe Illustrator is one of the applications included in the Adobe Creative Cloud suite. So to get this application, you'll want to go to the ITS website, which is its.weill.cornell.edu. And in that search menu, type Adobe Creative Cloud. And that's going to bring you to the Adobe Creative Cloud service page. There are different instructions for faculty and staff because they're kind of different license types. Faculty and staff are going to apply for a Creative Cloud license by filling out an installation form on my help desk. License approval can take up to 10 days, but there is a trial version of Adobe that you can use in the interim while you're waiting for that official copy to be approved. Students, it's a slightly different protocol, but if you fill out this online form, it's a Qualtrics survey, and that's going to allow you to request a copy. And just to note that you can only install Creative Cloud on one computer with the student license. What can you do with Illustrator at Weill Cornell? So some of the things that we use the program for, here in our department are to create custom logos and infographics. You can add text to your photos. It's another tool that lets you do that. Draw figures for papers, and this is kind of what we're going to do in the demo today. Make your communications cute. always important. We're a visual group. Modify floor plans or illustrate data with graphs. Illustrator has kind of a neat graph function as well, which is a lesson for another day, but it does exist. Here are just a couple examples of some work that we've done kind of in those categories. Infographics, I think, are a really helpful way to display information. This one we actually built we have a subscription to a stock image site where you can kind of download blank EPS templates and then fill in your information. So this was, I think just kind of downloaded the form of it and then was able to import some individual icons and program in some of the colors and add the text to customize it for the project we were working on. Make communications cute, always important. Like, how do you hype up another chat application? This one we just kind of used Illustrator to add a couple little icons and chat bubbles to make it look like people were really endorsing this tool we were going to launch. Illustrator lets you add text to photos. This is an overlay it's a JPEG with a vector drawing on top of it and then text layered on top. So it's kind of a cool way to combine different photo elements. This, like I was saying, is the graph feature. You can draw pie charts, you can draw bar graphs, which is this one, and then kind of play around with the patterns and the icons to make the graphs interesting. And you can modify floor plans. This was a real project I worked with a woman in capital planning on, where they were kind of looking at capacity and she needed to work with an existing floor plan and kind of color code it. So we used Illustrator to do that for her. So I'm going to take questions before we move on to the demo, but just to give you a preview of what we'll work on, I'm going to open up Illustrator and kind of show you what it looks like. And then we're going to go over how to use artboards, how to use the tools in Illustrator to draw some basic shapes, how to use the fill and stroke. This is how you add color to your shapes, how to combine and subtract shapes to make a more complex compound visual, how to add text, how to place and crop image files, and how to export. And because we promised that this was a session for scientists, we're going to draw mitochondria today. And this, to kind of resemble, I think, what some of these figures end up looking like when you're drawing for publications. So before I close out of the slideshow and launch Illustrator, any questions about what we've gone over so far?
None that I can see in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Give me just a moment to exit this.
Oh, there was one question that just came up. Is there a stock library to import these vectors for biology figures?
So that would be kind of what I mentioned before. I don't know of a specific one that has stock images for biology figures, although the internet is such a wild place. I'm sure you could type that in, like biology vector images and find something. What we use is Getty Images, which is something you pay for a license. And then once you have a subscription, they just have a huge stock of templates you can download. Again, maybe not specifically for biology, but you could probably find, depending on what you're working on, you could probably find something to work from.
There's also a question from Lisa about whether we have Illustrator in our computers. Lisa, if you would like to get a copy of Illustrator, please go to myhelpdesk.weill.cornell.edu and you can search for the Adobe Creative Cloud request form. And that's where you can put in a request to get a license for Creative Cloud, which includes Illustrator along with Photoshop, InDesign, and a bunch of other design tools.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa.
No problem. No other questions.
Okay, great. So we can, without further ado, launch into the demo. And Vanessa, can you see the screen right here with Illustrator?
Oh yeah, looks good.
Okay, cool. Let me drag this out a little on my end. And zoom too. Okay, so I've already set this up for the demo, but let me go ahead and open up a new tab so that you can see what it looks like when you start from scratch. I'm just going to File, New, just like with Word, and it's going to open up. These are some presets because I'm kind of in here a lot. Let's go ahead and open up a 5x7. But as you can see, you're just kind of opening up the same way you would in Word, a new document, and you can specify width and height, orientation, kind of, similar to creating a new file in any other program. And then you're going to come to this untitled screen, and I have just this one blank space that's 5x7 like I've preset. Artboards are a really handy tool in Illustrator. Over here on the left, you can see this is your whole Illustrator tool panel, and Artboard is one of the tools on the panel. If you hover over any of these, it's going to bring up a dialog box that kind of tells you what it is. Oh, it's not doing it right now. There we go. So this you can see it's the slice tool. I'm not getting the dialogue on this, but this is the Artboard tool. So if I click on that, you can see now I've got this blue dotted line around this one artboard that's on my page. I can adjust the size of this with the Artboard tool selected. And I can also draw out other ones, as long as you can see how my cursor is kind of the same hash mark that matches the Artboard tool. This means that I now have the power to draw additional artboards. If I want to kind of make a working space, if you want to, draw some shapes and then put them together on one artboard, that's how you do that. Pay attention to when the artboard tool is selected. There's going to be a number in the upper left-hand corner of each of these. There comes a point later in the process where you can export your work from Illustrator into different file formats. And you have the ability to export just what's on one artboard. You can kind of isolate that. So the first number in the upper left hand is something to pay attention to, because that's how you're going to select those artboards to export them. But we'll do that later. I'll show you how. All right. Any questions about just getting started and setting up your page drawing artboards?
We just there's Kimberly is trying to do this at the same time as you are. So Kimberly, just to get the 5x7 artboard, she's just going to File at the very top of Illustrator and going to New, and then a pop-up appears that allows you to set the measurements that you'd like your artboard to be. Am I missing anything else, Bridget?
No, that's perfect. Yep. So you see we're in print, and then over here under width and height is where you can set up that first document. And I've got orientation portrait. Great. All right, so I'm going to flip back up and let's go over how to just draw some basic shapes, work with lines and shapes. Let me get out of the Artboard tool, zoom in a little bit so that we can see. So let's start by just drawing a square. Over here on the left-hand panel, we've got all our different tools, and you can see this little rectangle tool here has a white arrow in the bottom right-hand corner. If a tool has that, it means that there's more than meets the eye, and you can click on the white arrow and pull out all the different shapes that you can build with that tool. Then I'm going to hover over to the arrow on the right, and it pulls out this kind of floating window that then you can place on your screen. And this is fun if you're going to, be drawing a couple different shapes and toggle back and forth between what you want to build. I've got rectangle selected. So if I were to just kind of get into the artboard and draw something out, you can see I've got this rectangle. But let's say, I've got a dashed line selected on this. But let's say I want to draw a perfect square. I'll delete out, and actually, I was going to save this for later, but I need to fix this is how I'm changing. So stroke is the term for the outside of the shape. And if you click on this little stroke thing that has an underline, it pulls up this panel that lets you kind of customize what the line looks like. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm also going to select my inside color for this. So these boxes up here are the fill color and the stroke color. Fill is the inside color and stroke is the color of the border. So let's click on this and I'm just gonna do red for now. Great. And then go away. And then go to my black arrow, click on my, click on my rectangle tool. And if I want to draw a perfect square, I'll hold down Shift. This constrains the proportions and lets you just draw out a perfect square shape. And then you can kind of move around. If I want to eliminate the stroke on my square, I'll highlight the shape, go back up to this stroke drop down and select, I'm not sure if it's showing up on the screen share right now, but there's a white box with a red line through it, and that's how you select no stroke color. So now you can see you've just got the red square. So now let's kind of play around with this shape is made up of a whole bunch of different anchor points, which lets you adjust the shape of it. If I was to click on the shape and hit on my keyboard the plus sign, you can see now I've got this little pen icon with a plus on the bottom. This lets me add anchor points to the shape. So I can like kind of go along, add an anchor point here, maybe add an anchor point here. And then these are other points you can play with to adjust the shape. So I could go over then to the white arrow. And the white arrow, I hope this dialog box comes up so you can see all of these things. If you hover in the right way, give you a really nice description of what the tool does. But the white arrow lets you isolate anchor points and kind of work with them a little bit more. So with the white arrow selected, I can click on this anchor and then like pull it in and make some new shapes. So likewise, I'm going to delete this and start again. Let's just draw one more red square. I can also delete anchor points to create new shapes. And by doing that, on my keyboard, I'm going to hit the minus key. So now I've got this pen icon with the minus at the bottom, and this is going to let me delete some of these blue anchor points you see. So let's hover over to this bottom one, click minus, and all of a sudden you can see you've got a triangle. So now we know how to draw a square and a triangle, and we can kind of practice putting them together. Before I move on to uniting shapes, any questions about how to use that rectangle tool to draw squares and rectangles?
Not that I can see.
Okay. All right, awesome. So let's see how I'm going down to this artboard and I've still got that pen with the minus icon. This means I have that tool selected. Your default mode in Illustrator is probably going to be this black arrow. So just remember that when you're kind of moving in between drawing, shift back to your black arrow because this is what allows you to work with the shapes. This is kind of like the neutral tool. If you've got your tools selected, you're going to be on the artboards like drawing stuff left and right, and it gets a little confusing. So rule of thumb, just kind of stay on the black arrow when you want to get back to neutral. All right, so let's combine shapes. I want to make this arrow. So to do that, I'll go back to my rectangle tool, draw out a rectangle. And then I'm going to make the arrow head by drawing one more square and turning it into a triangle. So again, I'm going to hold down Shift, draw out a perfect square, hit minus, delete that anchor point, and now we've got the triangle shape. I'm going to go back to this black selection tool. And then if I hover over the shape, do you see how now I've got the rounded arrow at the corner? This lets me rotate the shape. And I'm just clicking and kind of like pulling and dragging it around so that it's at a 90-degree angle. I'm going to go back to my black arrow and then kind of nudge it into shape. And so this you can either use your mouse, like use your mouse and your cursor, or if you need to make little micro adjustments, like I'm kind of getting close, then I just shift over to the keyboard and you can use the arrow keys to nudge it in, really make some small adjustments. Straighten that out. I want to combine these into one shape. So there's two different ways to do this. One is the Pathfinder tool, and I'll show you in Illustrator. If you go up to the top of Illustrator and click Window, this pulls down a whole bunch of different things that Illustrator does for you. And one of these is the Pathfinder tool. So if I click on Pathfinder, it pulls up this window that lets me do a couple different things with shapes. Pathfinder is how you're going to join shapes and also split them apart. And then there's another shortcut I can show you too. But with the Pathfinder mode, I'm going to select my arrow, hold down Shift to select the rectangle. This lets me select multiple shapes. And then Option click, see if I hover over this and it says to unite the shapes, I'm going to Option click to create a compound shape. So hold down my Option key, click Unite, and then we've got two different shapes. See, I could drag this around, and this has become one shape. It's no longer an arrow and a rectangle. So the other way to do this is with Shape Builder. So let's go back, undo move, to add. I think we're back to two different shapes. Let me make sure. Yep. So we've got the triangle and square. I'm going to put them back into place. There's a shape builder tool on the left-hand panel, and I think this might be a newer add. So like Pathfinder maybe was the original way to join shapes, and then they developed this new shape builder tool. I kind of prefer shape builder, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But with this one, you're going to do kind of the same method. Select the arrowhead, hold down Shift to also select rectangle, hover over your shape builder tool, click on that, and then you just draw a little squiggly line through the shapes you want to unite, and it's put it into one. I like this one because see how, so this one I made with the Pathfinder, and you still have, although it's one shape that you can move around, it does still, like you've still got the blue borders around the triangle and the rectangle. And for whatever reason, it kind of changes the way you can adjust color. If you use Shape Builder to draw the tool, like I still have my same fill and stroke panels at the top, and it just makes it a little bit easier to change the color of the shape. While we're at it, I want to show you in the stroke and fill panel how to add custom colors, because this is probably going to happen. There's, you can add entire libraries of color. You can just add an individual swatch. By doing that, you're going to pull up this fill panel and click down here on the button that says New Swatch. It's a little plus sign. This pulls up a dialog where you can enter in a color type. So if you have if you know the specific CMYK or RGB value of a color you want to have in your drawing, this is where you can create that color. So let's say I want to add that Wild Cornell orange, and I know the RGB colors of that, which you can find, by the way, on the brand website, brand.weil.edu. The colors for the dark orange in the Wild Cornell brand are 207, 69, 32. And I'm going to label this Cornell dark orange. Awesome. Yep, that looks familiar. Click OK. And now you can see up on this panel, we've got the new color has been added. And if I hover over this, it's telling me, yep, that's the Cornell dark orange I've added. And earlier I added Cornell red as well. So that's how you add custom colors to your fill and swatch panels. And it went ahead and changed my arrow to Cornell dark red too. So let's just play with, just so I can show you kind of what the Pathfinder tool does. In addition to uniting shapes, you can also minus front, intersect, and exclude. And I'll just show you real quickly what that looks like so you can play with the tool. So again, you're going to click this arrowhead, hold down Shift to click the rectangle. This is going to minus the front shape. So that's just eliminating the shape that you had on top. I'll show you with the squares how you do something similar with the other functions. So now we cut out everything except for where the two shapes intersect. And now we'll do the same thing. Hold down Shift and click exclude. Option. And now it's cut out the place where they do intersect. So just kind of show you, play around with the Pathfinder tool. It's what will let you combine shapes to create more complex ones. Okay. We're going to use the same tools and process that we just did to draw this mitochondria. Before I move on, any questions about combining shapes?
No questions about combining shapes. There's another one that I think will be better for later on in your presentation.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So to draw the mitochondria, this one I've already kind of put together, and I want to show you, if I hover over this, you can see the blue lines are showing me what shapes this is built of. So it's all combined now, but I've got a circle here, there's these little rectangles, there's a rectangle here, there's another circle. So this is exactly how we're going to build it. We're just making these shapes and uniting them together and kind of punching some stuff out. So let's start by drawing the first rectangle shape, which is going to be a combination of a circle and a square. So I'll go up to my shape panel, click the ellipse tool. If I were to just use this, it would give me an oval. But again, if I hold that shift key while I pull it out, it's going to restrain the proportions and let me draw a perfect circle. So there's the circle. Nice, I like it. Go back to the black arrow tool to kind of get it into shape. Now I'm going to draw a rectangle on top of that. And kind of, I want to line this up with the top of my circle because I want it to be about the same height. And again, these pink guidelines are showing me where the bottom of my shapes are lining up. So I'll pull that out, release it to let my tool go back to my black arrow. And let's see if this is going to line up with my circle. Yeah, pretty good. It fits nicely. Let me get it to the top. Okay. Let's combine them. So I'll click on the rectangle, hold down shift, click on the circle, go over to Shape Builder, and put them together. We need to draw the second half of this. So I'm just going to duplicate this shape and flip it around and join it with the first one we drew. So to duplicate a shape, the Alt key is your best friend. You're going to hold down your shape, hold down the Alt key, and then you just select your shape and drag it out. It draws out an exact copy of the shape. So the key is to keep your finger on the Alt key while you release that shape. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So just make sure while you're doing Alt to duplicate a shape, keep your finger on the Alt key. All right, nice. Make sure my black arrow is selected, and then you can see if I click on the shape, I get my rounded arrow again, so I can rotate it. And then I'll just move it on top of this first one, lining up pretty good. And we'll unite this one. So select, hold down shift, select the other one, shape builder, connect them, voila. I need to draw this mitochondria, I need a small shape on the top and then a larger rounded rectangle on the bottom. So I'm going to draw out an additional one right here and save it, for later. Okay, we'll put this to the side because we'll use it in just a second. All right, so now we need to draw these little rounded rectangle shapes to kind of show, I'm not actually sure what those are in the mitochondria, but we need to reproduce them. So we're going to go back up to rounded rectangles, select this. And let me just show you, if I pull out a long, narrow one, that's kind of the shape we're looking for. And I'm going to go ahead and change this color to something that's going to give me more contrast, like this light green. Nice. Oh. One with you. And then we'll do the same thing we did before and replicate this shape a couple times. So let's pull this up here. I'm going to select it, hold down the Alt key to drag out a couple more. You can also use a plain old copy paste here. Great. Okay, so let's kind of drag these into position. They don't have to be totally perfect because there is an alignment function, but I'm just going to drag my little rounded rectangles into place. Let's make another one. Cool. Okay, to line them all up, so to kind of make sure there's the same amount of space between each of the rounded rectangles horizontally, I'll click on this, hold down shift, and go ahead and select all of these rounded rectangles we have drawn. And then luckily, the align tool is under the pathfinder tool. So I've already got this window up here. Align, here's all the different ways that allows me to align objects. I want to do horizontal distribute center, which is this one. So now you can see it just lined up all those green rectangles with the same amount of space between each object. Now I want to group these, and they're already all selected. So I'm with all of the rounded rectangles selected together, I'll go up to Object and Group. And this just made it one shape. And then I also want to make sure that this object is on top. So let's go to Arrange, Bring to Front. We want to make sure this is the shape on top of the blue shape. We're going to go back to Pathfinder, select this, select the bottom, and then we're going to want to minus the front. So Option click, minus front, and it's just popped out that shape that we drew. And we are left with this cool little guy. So from here, I can go back to my black arrow, adjust the shape. And again, I'm holding down Shift right now so that it's not getting all out of proportion. And let's go ahead and also change the color on this to maybe like a green. And then I can drag this on top of the rounded rectangle we drew earlier and have more or less, actually, I can't see that green. I'm going to change it again. Let's just make it white. And maybe drag it out even a little more. Every mitochondria I draw is a little bit different, but there's more or less what we're going for. We've used our tools to build a couple shapes and put them together.
Hey, Bridget, would you mind showing one more time how you turn the rectangle tool into a rounded rectangle? Somebody's asking in the chat.
Yes, of course. Okay, so here's my tool panel, and right now here's the rectangle tool that I've clicked on this little white arrow at the bottom, and this is all the shapes that the rectangle tool draws. So rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, and flare. And then I earlier went ahead and made this little flyout menu. So to make the rectangle, I just switched from, I had it on rectangle mode and I clicked on rounded rectangle. Great question.
One other question just came in. Once you've combined a shape, can you disassemble them again into the components?
Yeah, well, the quickest way is undo. If you realize soon enough that you want to take it all apart again, you just go up to Edit, Undo, and that will take it apart. But let me see, actually, like, let's go up.
I think you just ungroup everything, and then it
Yeah,
might not be pretty, but that will disassemble everything.
Let me see if I think, I don't know if there's a quick, like, now that we've done a bunch of steps, if I go back to this arrow I drew with Shape Builder, I don't know if there's a quick method to undo the shape, but let's see what's below here. Shape Builder Live Paint. Yeah, I think once you put something together with Shape Builder, that's kind of where you're at. But I can look up, before I send out my follow-up email, I'll see if there's a way to take everything apart again. That's a good question. All right. Anything else?
I'm just putting some links in the chat for specific questions.
Oh, great. Okay.
About setting up the workspace that you've got.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you. I'll keep going. We've got about 10 minutes, so I'll keep going. And then if we've got some time at the end, we'll do more questions. Okay, great. So let's say you've got all your shapes together. Let's add text and let's add arrows to this document. So this is pretty easy. On my Illustrator tool panel, I'm going to go over to this T. This is your text tool. If I select this, it lets me come over and draw a text box that it's going to populate with this, with the filler text. You can then just type right over that. Figure 2 is what I want it to say. And then once you have your text tool selected, if you look up at the top of the menu, you have this character menu, kind of like what you would see in Word. So this is where you can select your font. I've got it highlighted to the 1898 Sans, that Wild Cornell font, with the drop down of all the different styles. Let's do bold for the heck of it. Oh, you might have to select to be able to do, make it bold. Yeah, there we go. This is also where, with your text selected, you can change the size. I can bump this up a little bit if I want. You've got paragraph alignment. So with the text tool selected, you can kind of play with the text in an object. And then again, you'll want to go back to your black arrow to play with the actual text box and move things around. To draw an arrow, we're just going to use the line tool. So this is right here on your tool panel. You've got the line. If I click on this white arrow again, you can see all the different kinds of lines you can draw, but we're just going to work with this basic line segment tool. Select it, draw out a line. Again, shift will, if you hold down shift while you're drawing your line, it will make it perfectly straight. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try again. Hold down shift, draw out your line, and then release. Nice. I haven't selected any stroke color for this. So with it still selected in blue, I'll go up to my stroke window. Let's just make a black line. And then you can kind of see here, now we've got the black line. The stroke menu next to it is how you change the weight of that line. So let's bump it up even more so you can see. Great, click on it again to select. And then this we saw earlier is how you modify the appearance of the line. That's how I made that dash line. If I select dash, then you get the broken line. And this is also how you put arrows on the line. So this one is going to be the start point of the path, so that's the left-hand side. And this is the end of the path, so that's the right-hand side. I want to make an arrow going forward. So let's select that nice one and then go back to my direct selection tool. And we've got our line. And this is where you can just kind of drag this into place. This also, same as with your shape, if I hover over this, like the end anchor, I get this round arrow, which means I can kind of tilt and draw this into shape. If I want to duplicate it, same deal, select it, use Alt to draw out another one. And there we go. Any questions on text or lines?
There is a question from BJ about how to draw a curved arrow. I believe that's the arc tool, but Bridget, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. This is, there's a thing specific to Illustrator called the Bezier curve, which is, it requires a lot of work, but it's a tool that lets you kind of draw more. This gives you kind of a shape of the arc that you don't have a ton of control over, but there's a way to, I think you do it with this. Oh, cheers. One of these tools lets you work with fancy, like drawing different points and then connecting them with a curve, but it requires a little bit of practice because you're basically laying down anchors and then like the curve will adjust depending on where you're putting points down.
And you're doing that with the pen tool, right?
I'm doing it with the pen tool, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so two different ways. There was that arc shape on the line, and then the pen tool is how to make more complicated curves. Good question. Okay, so let's say you also want to add a JPEG to your illustration. To do that, you are going to, let me get down to this figure. And we've got this actual like image of the mitochondria. I'm going to click on File, Place, and then that's going to pull up my document library. Oh, good, it went right to my folder. So I've got this mitochondria JPEG saved in my folder. I'm going to click Place in blue, select JPEG, and then you can see my cursor is loaded with a JPEG. So from here, let me click and you can see this is about the size it's going to lay it down. When I have the image in place, I have a whole new set of options at the top of my menu. These are lessons in themselves too, like trace and mask, but it does let me crop. So let me select the crop function. And then from here, you've got something that looks very similar or familiar, I'm sure. I can just kind of pull out the area that I want to crop in the photo and include. Maybe I'll stop right at the end of that little figure. That's kind of a nice place. So drag that out to the area that you want to include, hit return, and it's going to cut anything that wasn't in your crop selection. And now with the blue around the shape, that means it's selected. I'll hold down shift to change the proportions, and then I can put that on my artboard where I would like it. And then here I just added a little bit of text underneath that as well. Energy. Drag that into shape. All right, with a little bit of time left, I told you earlier, we would learn how to export this into other file formats. So if I was to save this right now, you can see the tab of my document has the AI file extension. This means that right now this is vector art. So this is, like we were saying earlier, this is the resolution independent art. You could probably send this as is to a publication and they would work with it as a vector. But let's say I wanted to show an example of what I was drawing to one of my colleagues who maybe doesn't have the program, or I just want, to like pop it in a Word document so that it's visible to everyone. You can export this as a JPEG or other file formats. But let's go back to the, I'm going to zoom out. And let's go back to the Artboard tool and see how in the upper left-hand corner, we've got this 08. So I want to keep that in mind because I want to export only Artboard 8 when I go do this. So let's go back to direct select. I'm going to go to File, Export, Export As. And then it's giving me the file format I want to export as. I do want to choose JPEG in this case. PNG has a transparent background, which means if I exported it as a PNG, I wouldn't have the white space beneath the figures, and I think it's important for this one. So I'll select JPEG as my file format. Click Use Artboards, most important part. And the next to range, we'll put 8 because that's the artboard we want to isolate and export. Click Export. This is giving me some options for color and resolution. Just make sure that is what you want it to be. Click OK. It already exists, that's okay. We'll replace it. And then now it just saved it to the folder that I had open, and I'm not sure if I can show you that, but I think I have to change my share, but let me do that really quickly and I can show you the little JPEG that exported.
While you're doing that, I'll answer a question that just came in. Are you able to copy paste portions of your artboard outside of Illustrator, or is the work around simply to screenshot the relevant areas? So it kind of depends what you're doing. I mean, I would honestly say that it's easier to do what Bridget just did and convert it to what you need for another program. Although if you're trying to, let's say, take something you created in Illustrator and upload it to Photoshop or like another application in Creative Cloud, all of those applications work very well together and they easily pull data that you might have created in another application. I can find a link about that so that you can take a look at how all of the systems work together, and then how you might convert things to put in like another document, maybe Word. But honestly, I'd recommend instead of copy pasting, just converting it to a friendlier file, depending on the application you'd like to put your image in. Sorry, go ahead, Bridget. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Your image out.
No, that's okay. I don't think the share worked actually, because you guys
No, I don't think it showed the JPEG, but it's in your folder. So
yeah. Let me see if
are there any other questions?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, cool. So there's you can see at the top. So this is the name of the file. It's got the JPEG at the end. So this now is this JPEG export of what we had on our artboard, which means also I can't get into this and edit the shapes. Like once it's exported as a JPEG, I can no longer, like the tools don't exist. I can't modify it anymore.
Any other questions before we wrap up today's session? I know there were a couple of questions where I put some links in the chat. I'll grab them all and make sure that Bridget has them, so when she emails out the helpful guides afterwards, those are included as well, so that everyone can read them.
Cool, thank you so much. And I will also I have a little PDF of instructions for how to draw the mitochondria shape. So if you want to practice exactly what we did in the session today, I'll give you those instructions.
It looks like I don't see any more questions. Oh, would you kindly advise on how to access? Oh, Arwa, the recording will be emailed to you since you registered for the session. I do have your email on file, so I'll just grab everybody's emails at the end of the day and just send you the link to the recording so that you have access to it. I think that's it.
All right. I hope everyone had a good session. It was lovely to work with you. Enjoy your lunch. And I'll send out a follow-up email, and then please, feel free to ask Vanessa or I questions about Illustrator.
Thanks, Bridget. And thanks
Yeah,
everyone for
thank
taking the
you.
time to learn.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.